feel like an intro, but this season 2 could have been done in one, but felt I needed to. The perfection of our conception projected through reflection that's connected is a blessing, and I needed to. Plus I need a few moments just to speak to you about these individuals whose mission to deceiving you, saying the achievable is just so unachievable, but that's only conceivable if you say and believe it's true. Protect the presence of essence with the aggression of a guard dog. Did you forget you was a god, y'all? Maybe you need someone believing you. Well, damn it, I believe in you. Not cause I'm expecting perception, I can see me in you. There's power in the questions and lessons is what I teach to you. Injecting my perspective suggested, no, I don't preach to you. Rejecting that you less than forever, know that you equal to. But this really for my people though, cause evil grows inside of the kind of minds that are ego drove. So engulfed inside of they ride, they cannot see the road. They criticize your drive, apply, they won't even go. Cause fear and faith is the only thing in comparison. One requires courage, the other desires evidence. How can what was ever determine what never been? Then again, the devil is ignorance mixed with arrogance. But we are the conscious collective. And CC, so I hope you get the message. But we are the conscious collective. Or CC, so I hope you get the message. Well,
most people who could exist will never experience that.
It's the gift, because most people that could exist mathematically
will never exist.
Wow. So right there, you are
you are as special a living entity as there ever was.
welcome. Thank you. You are too kind. You are what they call too kind. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is the show. There's power in the question. Information is information. And I'm your host, Q, doing what I do because I do it for the kids. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I started the show off. I was like, man, I like this video I'm listening to. I'm like, man, he talking. Because I don't really fuck with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I'm not saying he's not highly intelligent and highly informed. I just don't like how he takes his opinion. And I get it. It's his opinion. He feels how he feels. Who am I to tell him he's right or wrong? I just don't like how you telling somebody else, hey, man, you got to see it the way I see it because of all these numbers I read. People added this shit up, man. Them motherfuckers just got faith. Like, what do you have? What do you have other than faith? You have faith that this book that you read and these numbers that you gave me and these experiments you do prove something because the math you created say so. So I tell you, I value people's opinion, their perspective. We're all just guessing. We're all gods. So when I see people that get a lot of information and they think their information just makes them right, that shit, it comes off as bullyish to me. And if y'all know anything about me, it's that I fucking hate bullies. So I don't think Neil deGrasse Tyson a bully, but I'm just saying that I see how he comes at people that have a different belief. And I just don't like that shit. I don't like let them believe that it's a nigga in the sky. What's wrong with that? But my information say, I don't give a fuck what your information say. If that's how they get their way to see themselves, like I told you guys, I love using stories from the Bible because it's the number one book. If you look at the numbers say this is the number one book. People rock with the Bible more than they rock with any other book, and it's not even close. So I said, let me go through that 3 times. You know, I fuck with threes. So if that's the way somebody look at it and they need that book to make them feel like, man, they gonna come back and save me, so now I'm gonna be a good person. Hey, let them feel that way. Like, what's wrong with that? I feel like everybody can feel the way they want to feel. We may learn some more shit from each other. That's how valuable I think we are. You know how I feel about the concept of knowledge itself. I feel like a lot of people don't know themselves. They haven't learned how to believe in themselves. They haven't learned how to think that who they are is of value. They've learned to devalue who they are through shit they see. And that's why I come in. It's a big job, you know. Shouts out to me for taking this on. You know, you welcome. If you hear me, you welcome. So to get back on topic, I see this as needed, if you will. Because I remember when I was the person that needed it. And in some ways, I may even still need it myself. You know, sometimes you can go through things that you can feel like you're the only one going through this thing, and this is the worst thing you could have ever went through. And you feel alone in this. You start feeling crazy. Like the thing that's inside of you that makes you feel as strongly as you do. You watch so many people tell you that makes you weird, that makes you crazy, that makes you not like everybody else, like that's a negative thing, like that's a wrong thing. And this is why I think the false god society comes into play. But that imagery that you get fed on a daily, I feel like something should counteract it. Because you are God. You do have all the power. No one can take that from you. You are you. You are special. You're the only you. What homie say? All the people that could exist will never exist. Just by that. Didn't I tell y'all are valued? Even a dude that come with the science and talk shit about people that believe something differently than what he believes. And I don't like that. That's the thing I don't like. I love information. Give your information as information. I love to learn. This is why I know so much stupid shit, because I read that dumbass shit because I thought it was interesting. Just hearing someone else's story. And then I start valuing the concept of a story because I knew how much that story could mean to you. Because as an artist, I can imagine and I believe I can understand what it's like to have a perspective that means that much to you. It means so much to you that you want to bring it to fruition. You want to bring forth creation with something you created. You were the God in this idea, this story that you come up with, this thing that is also connected to your perspective. But a lot of the time, our story, if we succumb to the fear and we don't have faith in ourselves in the moment, we let the things that we see make us feel like something about us makes us less than. And when you're down at that place, it's tough because a lot of people, and you can feel like you by yourself, so a lot of people don't know what it's like to feel this bad. You start feeling the reason you feel this bad about an idea, something of you not expressing yourself is weighing you down. So to know how valuable that is for you, and to imagine what imagery can do to that if you succumb to fear in a moment, instead of pointing at you and making fun of you for being different, for feeling that way, I'd rather acknowledge you there and say, oh yeah, that's tough. I understand. Because I understand no matter what your story is, it doesn't make my story any less. I've talked to people that have had different lifestyles than I had. And I've had people tell me like, man, they come off like, Q, you always trying to be tough or something like that. And I'm like, it's not that I'm trying to be tough. It's that I'm so durable, I may just come off that way. Your lifestyle produced your perspective because of what you saw, your perception, what you heard, your perception. My lifestyle was different from yours. And people may compare it and go like, man, Q, you had to sleep outside, man. Like you went days without eating. It was friends that you never saw again due to the situation you were in. Just from living over there, you know this guy, he's no longer here. So that's my journey. That's my pain. That's what I went through. But just how much that meant to me, your situation could mean that much to you. There's no way of comparing the two. Because I can only be me and you can only be you. And that's true. See, I can give clues. See, I can start making this into a poem. Y'all better stop playing with me. I speak to the artist. And you can be like, man, I'm not an artist, but I'm speaking to the artist within you. Because if you're the only you and you think for yourself, imagine what kind of perspectives you can create. Not what someone told you you should be, who you actually are. Have you taken time to learn that? Because only you could tell that story. That shit is amazing. You guys remember season 1? I think I brought it up in this show too. What I define as amazing is watching someone do something that I can't do. And I can never be you, so let me see you do you. So someone has a story that's different from mine. That doesn't mean that, hey, your story is less value than mine because mine involved this. That was my pain. So I just used Neil deGrasse Tyson and his perspective with using his math and showed the pure imagination that can be in something that you can connect with people, opposed to telling them because this is how I see things, it must be right, so you must be wrong. We all guessing. How about looking at it in a way of, and this is just my opinion. You came to this podcast, first off, welcome. Second off, I want you to know you are God. And even in your physical form, you are a Jesus. You are a Mithra. You are a Messiah-like being that's living out your story. And I want to tell you that you are the epitome of value. And at the bare minimum, just from what I tell you, you are valued as, since you like to listen to what people outside yourself tell you about yourself, I want to be the one that tell you you $100 billion diamond at bare minimum. That's just what I'm giving you. So I want you to know when you come here, you are value. And everything else outside of yourself, you create its value. Because if you're not willing to pay it, it's not valued at that amount to you. I just want to show that beautiful connection where a guy that talks about people that have this, what he considers to be like this fantasy and made up belief structure. You have your belief structure also. You just predicated on numbers that you created. You have no evidence to prove anything you're saying. You're just looking at the story being told and figuring it out level by level. That's it. That's how you go down to the particles, and then you get into string theory, and string theory is just saying how they think the universe at the level in which they stop being able to perceive it. What does that so small? What does that do? And they think that's even made up of strings that connect everything. That's string theory. They're speaking on creation, the exact existence in which we experience. And even from that point, when they had no more answers, they had to have imagination. So that's how you get string theory and loop theory. So because someone has their imagination in a way that maybe isn't that small, maybe they think grander than that. And then that's when you get into the astronomers, because that's their realm. So if you're saying you're going beyond the astronomers with their stars and galaxies and clusters and quadrants, and you're telling them that you have a story that's greater than their story, sometimes they get defensive. What? My story is better than your story. I got numbers that support my stories. What you got, faith? And I'm sitting over there going, hey, you children, stop that. You both have to have faith. Neither of you motherfuckers can prove what y'all saying. Y'all just believe that shit. Now enjoy that. Tell each other stories. Help each other make their stories. And you may find out that something connects y'all together. So that's my whole shtick, if you will. My reasoning that I always talk about if you hear from season 1. I really feel like we are greater than what we have been told we are. I feel like everything that you put that much value into, you should put at a bare minimum in yourself. So when y'all hear my voice and y'all hear Q and I'm making my jokes and I'm laughing, I'm telling you my stories, telling you my pain, but trying to make it relatable, excitable, and you get the reasoning of the pain instead of focusing on the pain. Because I can tell y'all stories that probably you'll cry if you heard them. Shit, I may cry if I tell them. But even in the midst of that, I can get through that shit and look and say, damn, it is light at the end of the tunnel. It's all about how you view things. And my question to the astronomers and the people that believe what they believe, they can all agree that the darkness came first. They all agree on that. Whether you go science, religion, they agree that it was darkness first. Now this is where you guys get to see how I'm crazy and why I see the world like I see the world. My question is now, if everything in our reality has to have a reflection, what made darkness come first other than your perspective? Other than in your perspective, what made darkness come first? Because if I believe that God creates creation in reflections to live out the patterns for the reason they exist, for you people that are here from season 1. So other than your perspective, if darkness is of creation, that means light would have had to come in existence at the same time for it to exist. Because for it to be darkness, it can't be that without light. So when the astronomers and the religious people, they bump heads because they both saying what came first and how did it start everything. I'm over there on the side eating popcorn, tossing. How you motherfuckers know dark came first outside your perspective? What if in the placement of existence, you're able to see darkness first and then light? What if you're looking the wrong way? I told you guys I study a lot of crazy shit, so I'm going to try to break this down into Q terms. Let's say darkness comes into creation, but it comes into creation in my theory. We were created in reflections of each other. That's why you get the man, woman to make the child. You can't have up without down, left without right. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? So what if in creation, darkness was created on the right and light was created on the left? But from your perception, how you can see it, you sat closest to the right. So you saw the darkness first. And why energy is in motion as it's going by, you saw darkness, then light. But what if you was blinking at that moment? It's a lot of... See, this is the type of stuff I want to tell y'all about, because then y'all realize like, oh, you know about it. Now, look, we not finna do that. Everybody got their math and their perspectives. I learned a lot about y'all stuff, and I have my perspective. So anyway, when you have an idea like that, that thing that makes you you, I just don't want people to feel like they got to be suppressed. Because some people feel like they walk around in their existence and they're just compressed all the time. They're always being told what not to do. You can't do that. You can't do this. Don't do that. You look crazy doing that. No, don't wear that. So you're constantly being told who to be, especially when you're at the time in your life where you're trying to figure out who you want to be. You don't even know who you are yet, but you're being told you're not this, you don't do that. You are this, you do that. And I get it. You know, everybody has to be led. Everybody has to be taught. And I would never judge anybody's teaching methods. If you are a parent, if you are a guardian, if you are someone that just chose to give a fuck and be like, I'm going to be there for a motherfucker. Everything you do is amazing, because everything you do is extra. Because even just a little bit, you can choose to give a fuck and just try to help somebody out. Be a big brother, big sister or something. Or be like Mr. Lewis and come to the school and tell little kids they might not make it past 25, but you tell him you make $100,000 a year, he'll never forget that shit. And he was well groomed. Oh yeah, and I said in the audio, I think I said his car was white. His car was red. I don't even know why I said that in the recording. I'm listening to the story the other day, and I'm like, dude, you said he had a white car. It was a red car. But if you can help really nurture a person as they come up and even when they get older, so they're strong enough to face all this shit, because I don't think the shit is going to be easy to really take your strength back like that. I don't think it's going to be easy. I'm saying I believe it will be worth it. I believe anything worth having, you'll have to work for it and work to keep it. There's no easy pathway. It's just some that are worth it, and some you may feel like at the end were not. I just feel it'd be tough to be at the end of your journey, and all you have now are memories of your story. What kind of book are you creating? When someone reads the story of you, because you will become their memories. The ones that love you, the ones that knew you, you will become a part of their memories. You're going to live on in existence forever. R.I.E. my brother-in-law Tony. R.I.E. my brother Sosa. R.I.E. my auntie. And R.I.E. I hope you rest, and you deserve to rest into eternity. To my grandma. The impact you have on people, that'll mean a lot more to them than you can ever know. Being the person that says, hey, you don't have to fear because I'm here. You get to be the physical representation of something that helps them battle fears that they'll have to experience for the rest of their lives. So when you help build them up, try to help nurture them, because there are people out here that will try to manipulate them into being exactly what they want them to be for their benefit. So I just value a story because I believe I know what goes into it. So a lot of times I feel like I may speak for the artists, and I just feel like everybody got a little artistry in them. No matter what your form of expression is, you could be a motherfucker that be like, watch, I get the best grades. You be like, oh, I'm gonna be the best worker. You be like, oh, I'm gonna be the best dancer. Some girl be like, I'm gonna be the best twerker. You got somebody saying, I'm gonna be the best doctor. I'm gonna be the best lawyer. I'm gonna dunk like Vince Carter, or take care of my daughter, or my son. Boy, I make a song. Y'all remember how I did season 1? Season 1 was all about you. Season 2, it's going to be about what? That's going to be a very important thing here. What? Because season 1 is about knowledge itself. So I'm trying to break down you are of creation. That's what I'm talking about in season 1. It's about you. You are part of everything. That's why we are the conscious collective. You feel me? So I said we're stuck in a holy trinity. And I said the holy trinity are made up of three-letter words that equal 1 3-letter words. And I said, if you know about Tesla, you can go 3, 6, 9, but that's a whole nother level of stuff. And that ain't my type of show because I don't know all about that. I just know about 3. So I told you the first one was why. First word, why. No, that's power in the question. So once you ask the first question of why, you get its reflection, the answer. Because everything must come into existence together. Has to have a reflection to exist. So you get why, then you get the answer. The next question, for those who remember season 1, next question is how. So you figured out why. Why the fuck is this doing this? Why the fuck is this happening? You figure out the why. Now get to the how. How the fuck do I stop it? How do I keep it going? How do I prevent this from ever happening again? Once you get the answer to how, now it's up to you to do the action. But this is the Holy Trinity we're stuck in. So the way I look at it is neither of those, the why or the how, could start without the other 3-letter word, which is ask. So your first action can be something, bringing forth creation. So you ask the question, why? Get the answer. You ask the question, how? You get the answer. Now that you have that information, what do you choose to do? And that completes creation. It's the same way, look at it in a relationship. You can say, or one night stand, whatever y'all doing out here in these streets, have fun, be safe. So you go, why she look that good? God damn, why she look that good? Over there turning me on the way she turning me on, right? You see it. She over there just doing it. Everything she do turning you on. The way she drinking the water. Oh, why she gonna drink that water like that? Ugh. Why is she gonna drink that water like that in front of me? She know how I'm feeling. So you go through the why. Damn, cause she bad than a motherfucker. Boy, I want to get some of that now. Boom. You start contemplating, conscious. All your conscious thoughts supersede your action. Now you conscious. Damn. Ask yourself the power, which is in the question. How do I get that? I know I want it. I know I want it. But for it to get to that want, how do I get that? Maybe I go over there, buy a drink, do the boom, boom. You might go over there, talk to her. You may bump into her. You may see she got something over there. So you go, oh, shit, she got a book about the Velveteen Rabbit. Shit, I'm going to walk over there and call her ass Bunny. Like, you just come up with stupid shit. You come up with whatever you can, but you got to figure out that how because you know you want it. So, third dimension, boom, you figure out how. I'm going to go over here, buy a drink, try to say something to her. I feel like my breath smelling good. I look a little good. I probably smell a little good. I think she looked at me a few times. I was looking at her. So you start contemplating and making logical reasons on this leap of faith you about to take. So you bring forth creation after you get the how and you decide, you choose to take that leap of faith and go find out what's happening. That's the action. That's bringing forth creation. Why, how, ask. The Holy Trinity. And it always gets you back to action. It started with the action of you asking why or how. And it can end. This is where you have choice. It can end. It will end with how you choose to act on what you now believe and what choice that you make. Some people can make a choice of action and still do nothing. What I'm saying is with wisdom, we have to get to what's most important now. Because now this is what I told you about wants or dreams. And I gave you my definition of a want, right? You better listen to season 2, episode 1. That's the first episode of the season. I do my thing, I think. Y'all tell me. But for me, I did my thing. So I told you my definition of want. But just how I gave you why, how, and of course the action of ask, doing. That's why I say what you choose to do is up to you. Good, evil, devil, God. Remember, I did all that season 1. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go back through season 1 because trust me, it's a fun ride. But that's just my opinion. So it's still all about you. And now we're getting into the what I call wisdom, which is comprised of what, which is what you want, when, which is when you want it, and work, the work you're willing to put in to get it. But then you have the option of your reflection. With whom do you want to share it? So by yourself, you can have those 3 4-letter words that all start with a W. What, work, and when. And the order's supposed to go what, when, and work. That's the order. Because when you think of what, it's like you figure out what you want. You know, whatever it is. You could have wanted the girl number. You could have wanted to start a career. You could have wanted to make a sandwich. You could have wanted to get in shape. You could have wanted abs. Like, figure out what that what is first. What you want. Once you figure that out, it's when do you want it. Like for the example I gave, you can picture like a club or something. And he see a chick and just vision alone, he went, God damn, he feeling something different. He ain't saying it's just because she that bad. He's saying it's something deeper than that. And sometimes he just looking, because I seen some shit and I said, yeah, I saw some shit today. Look, I said, why would she walk over here to me like that? I thought I was being set up by the devil. I said, the devil don't want me to do this show. The devil don't want me to do this show. Because he sent one toward me, and then she gonna start giggling. We was in line. She gonna start giggling. I said, girl. So I had to restrain myself. You see, she gonna come stand right behind me. Like, how you just luck the time and come stand behind me? I said, boy, if love wasn't more important to me, you know what I mean? Ooh, I was tempted. Jesus, no, I was tempted. But I ain't do nothing. I kept it together. Woo, y'all don't know the battles I go through. But anyway, so you see it and you like, that's why you want it. So that's what you want. Now you got to look at when you want it. Oh, shit. Now you got to start calculating some shit. This is where wisdom comes in. Because now you got to start calculating some shit like, damn, how many dudes looked at her? You start scoping. You like, do a nigga look better than me? Yes, that's what we do, guys. Don't stunt. You know damn well you done looked around the room and tried to say where you rank amongst the looking niggas. Like, man, if a bitch came in here, she'll probably like that nigga, but I'll shoot that nigga if I had to. Like, you know, come on now. We opening up here. I should start making us hug ourselves. We need that. Maybe I need it, but we all need it. Oh, I'm gonna have an affirmation for your ass, and you gonna do it. I'm gonna pause the recording. I'm gonna keep recording, but I'm gonna just make a long gap if you don't do it. I'm gonna be like, do it. Tell yourself you amazing. Tell yourself you special. Tell yourself you one of one. You the greatest thing walking up this earth. And even if you don't believe it, some nigga that's talking through a microphone believe it. And he make songs sometime and he think he can rap. So even if you don't believe in yourself that much, just know somebody does. So if ever you in that moment where you feel like nobody does, I do. So you go back to, ranking yourself. Like, what do I match up with the niggas in here? You start looking at niggas and you start judging niggas. Like, that nigga, his outfit kind of clean. Oh, that nigga clearly got money. I don't even know why he in here studying like that. Everybody see the watch. He ordered 4 bottles. He ordered 4 bottles. And you over there getting in your feelings and you start realizing, like, you not the upper echelon. So you like, when, nigga? I got to get that shit now. I got to get now. So now you like, man, what can I come up with now? Because you figured out what you want, when you want it. I want that shit now. What we want? Some shit. When we want it? Now. You heard the little shit they be, where they do the little marches and they say that little whatever they say. So you figure out because of wisdom. You just use the little causality. I'm not the upper echelon. She bad. Chances are other people gonna like her. If somebody, slide in that moment, give her that opportunity before I do, she might take it. So speed is my option. I'm not the lion in this hunt. I'm the motherfucking cheetah. So I gotta be there first. So you make a plan. Okay, I'm gonna bump into her. Oh shit, make a drink fall. Oh, I'll pay for that. Sure, I got a little money. Hope my kids eat. So you come up with a little plan. So that's your when you want it, because you understand time is a bitch. So that's the work you put in. You came up with the plan, now just go do it. A lot of people had that shit in their head, never act on it, and see her walk away with some other nigga, and you go walk away believing in yourself like, I could have got it if I wanted it. So that's the difference from what I consider to be an artist and a hidden artist that gets stopped by fear. So when I come to you guys, I'm coming to you guys like that. I feel like just for the artist that's out there, you look at yourself and you don't know how to express who you are. You feel like who you are is less than. When I'm telling you, no. Who you are is what makes you special. Now, if you crazy, we might put your crazy ass in a box. That's what we might do, because you fucking tripping. What the fuck is your problem? Yeah, that can happen. But I just feel like if enough people make positivity and you see the value in people, we probably have a few of them too. Because you got to be a crazy motherfucker to be like, I'm going to kill everybody. But why? Why are you killing people? What the who told you want enough space? Like, what are you doing? So imagine what happens if you're in a neighborhood, like you're a regular person, and you live next door to a known killer. What would it turn you into consciously? If you believe, you don't even have to know, you just have to believe. You have to believe there's something of danger. Your immediate reaction isn't to defend and or protect. Mine is usually protect, even at my detriment. So when you see somebody that takes that leap of faith, it took courage. So I'm like, man, we should help nurture that. It's people that probably wouldn't even feel sick. They probably wouldn't feel like an outcast if they felt like them being them was the thing that people value. But sometimes we get caught up on what we believe because somebody said it. And I'm just saying that's their story. What's your story? Even when it's a scary story that you believe in, you're scared. It's a monster under the bed. I'm just telling you, you here today. Did the monster get you yesterday? So for you to be scared, for you to have fear, you have to be making that up in your own mind. Because you believe there's a monster that's there, but you have no evidence to support it. Just a bunch of beliefs running wild based on a bunch of things you make up. You allowed them to manipulate you to paint the image in your head because they couldn't add any images to your head. So that's my little 3-word thing for season 2. And when you involve your reflection, you get another one, because now you about to ascend, and that's with whom you want to share all of existence. So we can start on one of those. We can do what? The reason this is a different type of question, because remember, it's power in the question. So the what, you could put 3 question marks behind it if you want. You could put 4, whatever. So what? That's a question for existence. Like, what is? What is right there? Like, what is next to? What the fuck is that? Like, it has to be in existence when you bring what into the question. Like, if you hear noise, you heard the shit. You know it exists because you heard it. But a motherfucker to say, what was that? You will have to learn something new. What is a question for existence? Because it's a question for existence, it's things that you do know exist. Like if you heard a noise from the room and you know there's only one motherfucker in that room, you be like, what was that noise? You be like, it was that motherfucker in that room making that noise. But it's things you don't know, like the sound I brung up. So if you hear a sound, like what was that? That's a question you can't answer. So that question may even stay in your mind. You may not even ask that question because you may feel like it's stupid, or you may feel like no one has the answer because you lost in the world looking for answers that's answerless. But that's neither here nor there. So what is a question for existence? But it's also a known unknown. Remember on the Boondocks? Remember on the Boondocks when what's his homie name? I think it was Samuel L. Jackson. He was voicing the guy. I think his name was Jen Rummy. So he's talking to Riley in the back seat, and he asked him my question, which was what? Now, Riley responded with my question of what, and it made Jen Rummy mad. This the Samuel L. Jackson character. So the character asked, what country you from? Riley say, what? He said, what ain't no country I ever heard of. They speak English and what? Riley say, what? He said, English, motherfucker. Do you speak it? Riley said, what? English, motherfucker. Riley said, what? Jim Rummy got so mad at Riley. He goes, say what again? Say what again? Say what another motherfucker? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what again? So that's the word we dealing with. And you see what kind of animosity that brings. Just what by itself. But before that, then he was saying the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Riley, of course, said, what? So Jim Rummy explains, just because you don't have evidence that something does exist doesn't mean you have evidence that something doesn't exist. What y'all think Riley said? What? I think that's what he said. But it's helping my story. So Jim Rummy explains, see, there are known knowns and there are known unknowns, but there are also unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know. This is why what is a question for existence. But I love that concept. I know it's a real philosophical term, and I remember reading it. But I like how Samuel Jackson did it on the little Jim Rummy, whatever his name was, character on the Boondocks. I love how he did it. There are known knowns. So you can be like, I know that's my car, or I know my mama smoked cigarettes or something. I know my mama beat me in a race one time with a cigarette in her mouth. But look, we're not talking about me right now. That's a true story. This woman dusted me smoking a square one time, and I was in shape. In front of everybody. But that's neither here nor there. So you know that. It's a known known. But there are also unknown unknowns. Things we know we don't know. Like, what's 18 times 316? I don't know that shit. I can get a calculator. But you know you don't know that shit. Like, what it look like to see your father at your graduations. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know. You got to find the joke in every tragedy. Every comedy is a tragedy when you think about it, but I ain't going to break that down right now. There are things you just know you don't know, but there are also unknown unknowns. Things you don't know, you don't know. I said, God dog it. I said, he is talking my type of talk. So I like this. I like this. Because the way I see that, and I think it's very straightforward, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It's my show. I'm telling you my perspective on stuff. Come on now. We is rocking this season 2. Y'all ain't like the intro? Well, listen. So you don't know what you don't know. And I had posed a question. And I posed this question to anyone that can hear me. Are you stable? I think that's a tough question. This is more of a season 1 type thing. I may come back to it. But if it's something you don't know, you don't know. You could think like, man, I'm doing real good in life. I'm okay. I'm mentally, I'm straight. But what if there's something you're not thinking about that could happen that can just crumble you? Are you prepared for those fights? But, I ain't trying to get into all that. But there's just things you don't know. So you don't understand that you don't even understand. Like you're just walking around. It's probably a planet and an animal right now that you don't know exists, but it exists. But just because you don't know it exists, you don't even know to even think of its existence because you don't know it exists, doesn't make that animal non-existent. You just don't know about them. But just like sound, nothing exists in your reality until you perceive it. But for the word what, to get back to that, but this is where I see wisdom come into place after knowledge of self. So we're going to keep it simple to see how it applies to everything in existence. So in my perception, you ask, right? What is this? Or whatever your question is. Like you saw Shorty walking, you was like, what is that? You can start with why you want to know what it is. Then you can find your answer. Because for some reason, I'm magnetically pulled to this thick-ass, badass woman. But I already kind of broke that down to y'all already, showing you how to connect everything. Because I already broke it down earlier in the episode. I don't want to repeat it. So remember, whenever you're trying to find a reflection to something, it takes some work. So like if you ask a question, it takes work to find the answer. Doesn't mean the answer don't exist. It's just a known unknown at the moment. But before you had the question, It was an unknown. So you just got closer to bringing something into existence. This is what I mean when I say you're a God, but whatever. But remember, I always tell you, like, what you choose to do or whatever you deem necessary to do to find out exactly what it is. But information is just information. So after all you did and after how hard you worked, did you learn what it is? Or did you just create a perspective based on your perception on what you think, believe, and or know what it is? You may be like, oh yeah, I like her, and then I'm gonna go get her. This is how I'm gonna get her. You do your little action and you fail. It's the only thing you don't you don't get to know what it was or it is. You just left with the memories. That's also a part of existence. And the story you get to make is only yours. So that's valuable to me. So you even see how what you start with is what you end with. Just like in season 1, you start with the action of ask to bring those how and what, those reflections in existence for them to create reflections. But then after you did that consciously, you then had a choice to make to bring that consciousness into the third dimension, which is bringing forth creation. So you always start where you end and you end where you start. You start with an action, you end with an action, but that action brings forth creation. So that's why no matter how you live in your existence, you can be stuck in the Holy Trinity like we are, but you're always going to live it out. So for you to be born, somebody had to go through pain to bring forth that creation. And the moment you are born, you're given the opportunity of life. And what you choose to do with it is up to you. Because at some point, you're going to have to give back the gift you were given and experience death. And I know a lot of people get scared when it's the unknown. And you make up stories about what it can possibly be. But you know everything in existence must have a reflection, but only you can take that experience. But I may come back to this because this was just a little regular chill episode. I ain't wrap it around like I normally wrap it around, but I might come back to it. We never know. But don't let your past bully your present into becoming your future, because what they call pure is tampered with. The cure can't answer it. You're lost in the world looking for answers that's answerless.
Look, man, this show finna change, y'all. Spoon fed long enough, now it's game on. Flame on, Johnny Storm with his napalm. Stay calm, yeah, strong, but it ain't on. Excuse me? But there's power in the question. You'll see that the power's in your essence. Confuse me? But I found it impressive. I constantly responded and found a reflection. Is also reflective. Now tell me what is info. Disregard, you don't know what your info. Start saying you a god playing limbo. That shit I had you at odds with your kinfolk. You telling me it came from God cause I'm in rote. Forgive me, but it's hard to compress all his knowledge of self and astonishing in post to invoke. I'm a god that's within quotes. I've been dope and my conscience a big hope. Accuse me if you think that I'm wrong when I speak with my balls, but this is his show.